Man, I can't go to sleep. So I was like, let's just hop on some craft. And I low key want to listen to them videos that be like them Reddit stories, bro. Finna throw me on. Finna throw me one on real quick. You know what I'm saying? It's one specific YouTuber. What's his name? Baby Jamie. Yep.
Alright, this cave that I decided to make my base in is...
And Minecraft is too loud right now. Alright, let's see which video. I usually go to sleep to these, but He doesn't do this all the time? Oh man, I done watched all of them. Fudge. Alright, let's find another one. Vembo? Bet.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Vembo.
I can rock with this.
Here. Today's video is a bit of a special one. It's a long one, so go ahead and get comfortable. Whether you're watching from work, chilling at home, or just need something to throw on in the background, this is the perfect time to settle in. The video you're about to watch is a full compilation of some of my previous uploads, but don't skip ahead just yet, because the first hour is filled with brand new stories you haven't seen before, fresh content, new twists, and plenty to keep you locked in. Also, if you've been enjoying the videos and want to support the channel, consider becoming a member. Members get early access to videos like this one, and also get to help decide what topics I cover in the future. It's a great way to be part of the process and keep the content flowing. Thanks for being here, and let's jump right into it. Let's start with this absolute doozy from Am I the Arsehole? I'm 34 years old, and I've been married to my wife Lisa for 8 years. We have 2 kids together, ages 5 and 7. Lisa has always been close with her sister Monica, who's 29 and has never really had her life together. Monica dropped out of college twice, can't hold down a job for more than 6 months, and has this habit of making everyone else's problems her emergency. About 2 years ago, Monica got pregnant. She wasn't with the father anymore, said he was a deadbeat who wanted nothing to do with the baby. Lisa immediately went into protective big sister mode and insisted we help Monica out. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I love my wife, so I agreed to let Monica stay in our guest room until she got back on her feet. That was supposed to be temporary. 2 years later, Monica is still living in our house, rent-free, contributing absolutely nothing to household expenses and treating our home like her personal hotel. She leaves dishes everywhere, doesn't clean up after herself, and expects Lisa to watch the baby whenever she wants to go out with friends. The breaking point came last month. I came home from work to find Monica had thrown a party in our living room while Lisa was at work and our kids were at school. There were empty beer bottles everywhere, cigarette butts on our patio, and someone had spilled red wine on our white carpet. When I confronted Monica about it, she laughed and said it wasn't that big of a deal, that I needed to lighten up. I told Lisa that night that Monica needed to move out. Lisa got defensive and said Monica was going through a hard time, that she was family and we couldn't just abandon her. I said I understood that, but Monica had been taking advantage of our generosity for 2 years and it was affecting our marriage and our home life. Lisa accused me of being heartless and said I was trying to make her choose between her sister and her husband. I told her I wasn't asking her to choose. I was asking her to set boundaries with someone who was clearly using us. Things escalated from there. Lisa said if I forced Monica to leave, she'd never forgive me. I said if Monica didn't leave, I was going to start looking for my own place, because I was done living like this. The next morning, I woke up to find that Lisa had packed bags for herself and our kids. She said they were going to stay at her mother's house until I came to my senses and apologised to Monica. She took our children and left, and that was 3 weeks ago. I've been texting and calling, trying to get Lisa to come home so we can talk about this rationally, but she's not responding. Monica is still living in our house, acting like nothing happened, and now she's telling people that I kicked out my own wife and children over a little mess. Yesterday, Lisa's mother called me and said I was destroying my family over petty grievances, that Monica is a single mother who needs support, and that a real man would step up and help family instead of being selfish. She said if I don't apologise and ask Monica to stay permanently, Lisa is going to file for divorce. I feel like I'm going crazy. All I wanted was for someone who's been freeloading in our house for 2 years to start contributing or find her own place. Now I'm being painted as the villain who broke up his own family. Monica is telling everyone that I've been hostile toward her from day one, which isn't true. I tried to be welcoming and supportive, but there's only so much a person can take. My friends are split. Some say I should have put my foot down sooner. Others say I should just suck it up for the sake of my marriage. But the thought of Monica living in our house permanently, continuing to take advantage while contributing nothing, makes me feel sick. So am I the arsehole for giving my wife an ultimatum about her sister? That story is over. Wow, this guy's living in an actual nightmare scenario where his kindness got weaponized against him. 2 years of free housing, and this woman throws a party in his living room like she owns the place. The audacity is genuinely breathtaking. And now his wife has essentially chosen her freeloading sister over their marriage and kids. This isn't about family loyalty anymore. This is about basic respect and boundaries. Sometimes being the reasonable person in an unreasonable situation makes you look like the bad guy, but this man is absolutely not the arsehole here. Let's move on to something that'll make your blood boil in a completely different way. This happened about 6 months ago, but I'm still furious about it, and my therapist suggested I write it out. I'm a 28-year-old woman, and I work as a paediatric nurse at a children's hospital. It's demanding work, both emotionally and physically, but I love what I do. I was shopping at Target on a Saturday afternoon, still in my scrubs because I'd just gotten off a 12-hour shift. I was exhausted, running on 3 hours of sleep, and I just needed to grab some groceries and essentials before heading home. I was in the pharmacy section looking for some ibuprofen when this woman, probably in her 50s, approached me with her cart. She had this entitled look on her face that I'd seen 1,000 times before. "Excuse me," she said, snapping her fingers at me. "I need you to get me the good cough medicine from behind the counter. The stuff that actually works." I looked at her, confused. "I'm sorry, I don't work here, I'm just shopping." She looked me up and down with this disgusted expression. "Don't lie to me. You're wearing scrubs. Obviously, you work here in the pharmacy." I explained that I was a nurse at the children's hospital and that I was just shopping after my shift. I even showed her my hospital ID badge that was still clipped to my scrubs. Instead of apologising, she got angry. "Well, if you're really a nurse, then you should be helping people. It's your job to help sick people, and I'm sick. I have a terrible cough and I need medicine." I told her again that I didn't work at Target, that she needed to speak to an actual pharmacy employee, and that I was off duty and just trying to do my own shopping. That's when she completely lost it. She started yelling that I was a terrible nurse, that I obviously didn't care about helping people, and that she was going to report me to whatever hospital I worked at for being rude and unprofessional. Other customers were starting to stare, and I could feel my face getting hot with embarrassment. I tried to walk away, but she followed me, continuing to berate me about how healthcare workers should always be willing to help, and that I was probably a fake nurse anyway, because real nurses care about people. Finally, an actual Target employee came over to see what the commotion was about. The woman immediately switched tactics and told the employee that I was a Target pharmacy worker who was refusing to help her and being extremely rude. The Target employee looked at me questioningly, and I had to explain the entire situation again. Meanwhile, this woman is still insisting that because I'm wearing scrubs, I obviously work there, and I'm just trying to get out of doing my job. The Target employee was great. She calmly explained to the woman that I was clearly a customer, that scrubs don't mean someone works at Target, and that she would be happy to help her find what she needed in the pharmacy section. But the woman wasn't done. She demanded to speak to a manager, and when the manager came over, she told him that his employee, meaning me, had been incredibly rude and unprofessional, and that she wanted me fired. The manager looked at me, and I had to go through the whole explanation again. He was very apologetic and told the woman that I didn't work there, but she kept insisting that I was lying, and that everyone was covering for me. Finally, I'd had enough. I was exhausted, I just wanted to go home, and I was tired of being harassed by this entitled woman. I pulled out my phone and showed her photos from my shift that day. Pictures of me with my paediatric patients that I take for their families, my hospital schedule, everything. I said, "Mom, I just spent 12 hours taking care of sick children. I've been on my feet all day. I haven't eaten a real meal, and I'm running on no sleep. I'm not trying to avoid helping you. I literally cannot help you because I don't work here. Please leave me alone." She stared at the photos for a minute, and I thought maybe she was finally going to realise her mistake and apologise. Instead, she said, "Well, if you're really a paediatric nurse, then you should know about cough medicine. You're still being unhelpful." At that point, I just walked away. The manager followed me and apologised profusely, said they'd handle the situation, and that I was welcome to finish my shopping in peace. I did see the woman later in the checkout line, and she was still complaining loudly to anyone who would listen about how rude the Target pharmacy staff had been to her. The whole thing was so absurd and frustrating. I spend my days taking care of sick kids, dealing with worried parents, making life or death decisions, and this woman wanted to publicly humiliate me because I wouldn't pretend to be a Target employee to help her buy cough drops. That story is over. The sheer entitlement of some people never ceases to amaze me. This woman saw scrubs and immediately decided this nurse owed her personal medical consultation in the middle of Target. Even after seeing proof that she worked at a children's hospital, she still demanded free medical advice. Healthcare workers already deal with enough without random strangers harassing them during their off hours. The audacity of following someone around a store yelling at them because they won't pretend to work there is just mind-blowing. Here's another one that had me questioning humanity. I'm 31 and I've been with my girlfriend Rachel for about 4 years. She has a 9-year-old daughter, Chloe, from a previous relationship. Chloe's biological father isn't in the picture, and I've basically been acting as her stepdad since Rachel and I got serious. I really care about Chloe. I help with homework, I go to her school events, I've taught her how to ride a bike, all that stuff. She calls me by my first name, which is fine. And I consider her family, even though Rachel and I aren't married yet. Here's where it gets complicated. I'm really into photography. It's been my hobby for about 10 years, and I've got some expensive equipment, professional cameras, lenses, lighting gear, the whole setup. It's probably worth around $15,000 total, and I've built up this collection slowly over the years. Chloe has shown some interest in photography lately. She's always asking to see my cameras and wants to know how everything works. I've been teaching her the basics with one of my older, less expensive cameras, and she's actually pretty good at it for a kid. Last month, Rachel suggested that for Chloe's 10th birthday, I should give her one of my cameras as a gift. Not one of the cheap ones I let her practice with, but one of my professional cameras worth about $3,000. I was taken aback. I explained that these cameras are really expensive and not appropriate for a 10-year-old. They're delicate, they require a lot of technical knowledge to use properly, and honestly, I wasn't comfortable giving away equipment that expensive. Rachel got upset and said I was being selfish. She said that if I really cared about Chloe, I would want to support her interests and help her develop her talent. She pointed out that I have multiple cameras, so it's not like I'd be giving away my only one. I tried to explain that it's not about the money, it's about the fact that these are professional tools that took me years to save up for. I offered to buy Chloe a really nice beginner camera that would be more appropriate for her age and skill level, something in the $300 to $500 range. Rachel said that wasn't good enough. She said Chloe deserves the best equipment if she's going to learn properly, and that I was basically telling her daughter that she wasn't worth investing in. The argument escalated from there. Rachel accused me of treating Chloe like she was less important than my hobby. She said that a real father figure would prioritise the child over material possessions. I pointed out that I never said Chloe wasn't important, just that a $3,000 camera isn't an appropriate gift for a 10-year-old. I mentioned that most professional photographers don't start with equipment that expensive, that it's something you work up to. Rachel then said something that really hurt. She said that since I'm not Chloe's real father, maybe I don't understand what it means to make sacrifices for your child. She said that if I can't step up and be generous when it matters, maybe I'm not ready to be part of their family. That stung because I've been trying really hard to be a good father figure to Chloe. I've spent thousands of dollars on her over the years for clothes, toys, school supplies, activities. I've rearranged my schedule countless times for her events. I've been there for her in every way I can think of. But apparently, not being willing to give away expensive professional equipment makes me selfish and uncommitted.
I still got bow and arrows, cuz.
The birthday party was last weekend, and I did buy Chloe a really nice beginner camera setup. It cost me about $400, and it came with a case, extra batteries, memory cards, everything she'd need to get started. Chloe seemed happy with it, but Rachel was cold to me the entire party. She made several comments in front of family and friends about how some people talk about caring but don't back it up with actions. Now Rachel is saying that I've shown my true colours, that I prioritise my stuff over her daughter, and that she's reconsidering our relationship because she needs someone who will put Chloe first in all situations. I'm so confused. I thought I was being reasonable by buying an age-appropriate gift instead of handing over professional equipment to a child. But Rachel is acting like I've committed some terrible betrayal. Her sister even called me and said I was being ridiculous, that it's just a camera and I should have given Chloe what she wanted for her birthday. She said that if I really loved Chloe, the money wouldn't matter. I feel like I'm being manipulated, but I also wonder if I'm being too protective of my equipment. Maybe I should have just given her the expensive camera and hoped for the best. Am I the arsehole for not giving my girlfriend's daughter my professional camera equipment? That story is over. This is emotional manipulation at its finest, and I'm genuinely angry on this guy's behalf. A professional camera worth $3,000 is not an appropriate gift for a 10-year-old, period. The fact that he bought her a $400 setup shows he absolutely supports her interest and wants to help her learn. But Rachel is using his love for Chloe as a weapon to guilt him into giving away expensive equipment that he worked years to afford. The comment about not being her real father was particularly cruel and designed to make him prove his commitment by making unreasonable sacrifices. Let me tell you about something that happened that will make you want to lock your doors and never let anyone in your house again. I'm 23 and I live with 3 roommates in a house we rent together. One of my roommates, Tyler, has this girlfriend named Jessica who basically moved in without anyone's permission about 4 months ago. She doesn't pay rent, doesn't contribute to utilities, and acts like she owns the place. At first we tried to be cool about it. Relationships happen, people spend nights over, whatever. But Jessica started leaving her stuff everywhere, using our food without asking, and hogging the bathroom for hours every morning. When we brought it up to Tyler, he said we were being dramatic and that she'd start contributing once she found a job. That was 4 months ago. She's still unemployed, still not paying anything, and now she's bringing friends over without asking and treating our living room like her personal hangout space. Last week I came home to find Jessica had rearranged our entire kitchen. She moved all our dishes to different cabinets, threw away food she said was expired even though it wasn't, and installed some weird spice rack system that none of us wanted. When I asked her what she was doing, she said she was just trying to make the space more functional since she spends so much time there. I told Tyler that night that this couldn't continue. Either Jessica starts paying her share of rent and utilities, or she needs to stop practically living here. Tyler got defensive and said I was being unreasonable, that Jessica was going through a tough time and we should be more supportive. The next morning, I woke up to find a note taped to my bedroom door. It was from Jessica, and it said that she'd noticed I seemed stressed about the living situation, so she'd taken the liberty of deep cleaning my room while I was asleep. She'd gone through my personal belongings, reorganised my closet, and even made my bed with different sheets that she said were more aesthetically pleasing. I was furious. She'd been in my private space without permission, touched my personal things, and acted like she was doing me a favour. I confronted her immediately and told her she had no right to enter my room, let alone go through my stuff. Jessica started crying and said she was just trying to help, that she thought I'd appreciate having a clean, organised space. Tyler came running when he heard her crying and immediately started yelling at me for making his girlfriend upset. I told Tyler that Jessica had crossed a major line and that I wanted her out of the house immediately. Tyler said I was overreacting and that Jessica was just trying to be nice. He said if I couldn't handle living with his girlfriend, maybe I should be the one to move out. That's when I snapped. I told Tyler that Jessica doesn't pay rent, doesn't contribute anything, and has been treating our shared space like her personal property for months. I said that none of us signed up to have a fifth roommate, especially one who thinks she can just go into our private rooms whenever she feels like it. Tyler said I was being cruel and that Jessica was practically family now. He said that if we couldn't accept her, then he'd have to reconsider living here too, but he wasn't going to choose between us and her. I talked to my other two roommates, and they both agreed that the situation had gotten out of hand. We decided to give Tyler an ultimatum. Either Jessica starts paying her fair share and respects our boundaries, or both of them need to find somewhere else to live. When we presented this to Tyler, he accused us of ganging up on him and his girlfriend. Jessica started sobbing and said we were being mean to her because we didn't like her, which wasn't true. We just wanted her to respect our space and contribute if she was going to live here. Tyler said we were all heartless and that real friends would be more understanding. He packed his stuff that same day and moved out with Jessica, but not before Jessica left another note, saying that she forgave us for being so unwelcoming and that she hoped we'd learn to be more open-hearted in the future. Now Tyler isn't speaking to any of us, and he's been telling mutual friends that we kicked him out because we were jealous of his relationship. Jessica has been posting on social media about how some people are too selfish to help others in need, and how grateful she is to have someone like Tyler who stands up for her. I feel bad that we lost a friend, but I also don't think we were wrong to expect basic respect and financial contribution from someone who was essentially living in our house. That story's over. This woman moved in without permission, contributed nothing for 4 months, then had the nerve to redecorate their kitchen and rifle through someone's private space. Tyler choosing his freeloading girlfriend over basic roommate etiquette shows exactly where his priorities lie. Sometimes you have to cut people loose when they refuse to respect the most basic boundaries. Here's one that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about wedding etiquette. I got married 3 months ago to my now husband David. We had a small ceremony with about 60 people, mostly family and close friends. We saved for 2 years to afford this wedding, and while it wasn't extravagant, it was exactly what we wanted. My cousin Amanda was invited along with her husband and their 2 kids, ages 8 and 11. Amanda and I aren't super close, but we're family, and I wanted her there. What I didn't expect was for her to treat my wedding like a free babysitting service. The problems started during the ceremony itself. Amanda's kids were running around, talking loudly, and at one point her 8-year-old actually walked up to the altar during our vows to ask his mum if he could have a snack. Amanda just waved him away instead of getting up to handle the situation. During the reception, things got worse. The kids were climbing on chairs, grabbing food off other people's plates, and running between tables while the servers were trying to work. Other guests were clearly annoyed, but Amanda was too busy drinking and socialising to pay attention to what her children were doing. The breaking point came during our first dance. We'd hired a photographer specifically to capture this moment, and it was really important to us. Right in the middle of the song, Amanda's 11-year-old ran onto the dance floor and started doing some kind of TikTok dance routine, completely interrupting our moment. The photographer missed the shot because he was trying to figure out what was happening. Our beautiful first dance turned into this chaotic scene with a kid flailing around in the background while Amanda laughed and filmed it on her phone like it was the cutest thing in the world. I was heartbroken. This was supposed to be one of the most special moments of our wedding day, and it was ruined. David tried to restart the dance, but the moment was gone and everyone was distracted. After the dance, I pulled Amanda aside and asked her to please keep her kids under control for the rest of the evening. I tried to be polite about it, but I was honestly pretty upset. Amanda immediately got defensive. She said her kids were just being kids and that I was being uptight. She said that weddings should be fun for everyone, including children, and that I was being selfish for expecting her to control every little thing they did. I explained that while I wanted kids to have fun, her children had been disruptive throughout the entire event and had just interrupted one of the most important moments of my wedding day. I asked if she could maybe take them outside for a few minutes to burn off some energy, or at least stay closer to them to prevent more incidents. Amanda rolled her eyes and said I was being bridezilla-ish and that I needed to relax. She said that if I didn't want kids at my wedding, I shouldn't have invited families. She told me that her kids were more important to her than my perfect wedding photos, and that I was being ridiculous for making a big deal out of it. The rest of the reception was tense. Amanda made a point of letting her kids do whatever they wanted, almost like she was proving a point. They knocked over a centerpiece, spilled juice on their fancy clothes, and continued to run around, despite other guests asking them to slow down. During the cake cutting, her 8-year-old tried to grab a piece directly off the cake before we'd even made the first cut. When David gently redirected him, Amanda snapped that we were being mean to her child, and that he was just excited. After the wedding, Amanda posted photos on Facebook of her kids at the reception with captions about how much fun they had and how great it was to have a family-friendly celebration. She made several comments about how some people take weddings too seriously and forget that it's supposed to be about bringing families together. Several family members have reached out to me since then. Some agreed that Amanda's kids were out of control and that she should have managed them better. Others said that I was being too harsh and that kids will be kids, especially at family events. My grandmother called me last week and said that Amanda was hurt by how I treated her at the wedding. She said that Amanda felt like I embarrassed her in front of the family and that I should apologise for making her feel unwelcome. I'm torn because I don't want family drama, but I also feel like Amanda completely disrespected my wedding day. I spent 2 years planning and saving for this event, and her lack of parenting turned several important moments into chaos. David is on my side and thinks Amanda was completely out of line, but he also thinks I should just let it go to keep peace in the family. He says the wedding is over and we can't change what happened, so there's no point in continuing to be upset about it. But I can't let it go. Every time I look at our wedding photos and see her kids in the background of what should have been intimate moments, I get angry all over again. Our first dance photo has her son's elbow in the corner because he was mid-dance move when the photographer finally got a shot. I feel like Amanda owes me an apology, not the other way around. But I'm starting to wonder if I'm being too unforgiving about the whole thing. That story is over. A child literally interrupting your first dance at your own wedding is not kids being kids, it's parents refusing to parent. Amanda turned what should have been a beautiful family celebration into her personal playground, while expecting everyone else to just deal with the chaos. The fact that she's now playing victim and expecting an apology after ruining multiple special moments is the cherry on top of this disaster Sunday. Some people really think the world revolves around them and their offspring. Let's dive into something that shows just how far some people will go to avoid taking responsibility for their actions. I'm 27 and I work as a manager at a mid-sized retail store. It's not glamorous work, but I've been there for 5 years and I've worked my way up from cashier to assistant manager to store manager. I take my job seriously and I try to treat all my employees fairly. About 8 months ago, we hired a new employee named Kevin. He's 19, this was his first real job, and at first he seemed eager to learn and work hard. I spent extra time training him, making sure he understood all our procedures and trying to help him succeed. But after about a month, Kevin's performance started declining rapidly. He was constantly late, sometimes by 30 or 40 minutes. He'd call in sick at least once a week, usually with suspicious timing like right before busy weekends or after he'd posted party photos on social media the night before. When Kevin was at work, he spent most of his time on his phone, even when there were customers waiting. He'd disappear for extended bathroom breaks, leave his register to chat with co-workers, and generally act like showing up was enough effort for the day. I tried talking to him multiple times. I explained that punctuality was important, that customers needed to be the priority, and that excessive phone use wasn't acceptable during work hours. Kevin would nod and agree, promise to do better, and then continue with the same behaviour. After about 4 months of this, I had to start writing him up, first for tardiness, then for excessive absences, then for poor customer service, after a customer complained that Kevin was texting while ringing up their purchase and didn't say a single word to them during the entire transaction. Each time I wrote Kevin up, his mother would call the store. She'd demand to speak to me and then launch into these long speeches about how Kevin was a good kid who was just adjusting to the working world. She'd make excuses for every single issue, blaming everything from traffic to his sleep schedule to stress from learning a new job. The first few times she called, I tried to be understanding. I explained that while I appreciated her concern for her son, Kevin needed to take responsibility for his own performance and that the standards applied to all employees equally. But Kevin's mum, Patricia, wasn't interested in hearing that. She started calling me almost weekly, sometimes multiple times per week, to complain about how I was treating her son. She'd say that I was being too hard on him, that I had unrealistic expectations, and that I was probably discriminating against him because he was young. The situation came to a head about 2 months ago. Kevin was scheduled to work a Saturday morning shift, which started at 8 a.m. At 8:30, we still hadn't heard from him, and he wasn't answering his phone. We were short-staffed and had a line of customers waiting. Kevin finally showed up at 9:45, nearly 2 hours late, with no explanation other than he overslept. This was his 6th unexcused late arrival in 3 weeks, and I'd already told him that another incident would result in termination. I called Kevin into the office and explained that I had to let him go. I went through all the documentation, showed him the pattern of tardiness and absences, and explained that we'd given him multiple chances to improve his performance. Kevin seemed shocked, like he genuinely didn't understand why this was happening. He said that everyone oversleeps sometimes and that I was being unfair. He asked for another chance, promised he'd do better, but I explained that we'd already had this conversation many times and nothing had changed. Within an hour of Kevin leaving, Patricia called the store screaming. She accused me of firing her son unfairly, said that I'd been targeting him from the beginning, and demanded that I give him his job back immediately. I calmly explained the situation, went through the documentation, and told her that Kevin had been given multiple warnings and opportunities to improve. Patricia said that didn't matter, that Kevin was still learning, and that I should have been more patient with him. Then Patricia said something that made my jaw drop. She said that it was partially my fault that Kevin had performance issues because I hadn't been supportive enough as a manager. She said that if I'd been a better leader, Kevin wouldn't have struggled so much, and that firing him proved I wasn't qualified to manage young employees. She actually blamed me for her son's chronic lateness, saying that maybe if I'd made the job more engaging and fun, Kevin would have been more motivated to show up on time. She said that good managers inspire their employees to succeed, and since Kevin didn't succeed, I must be a bad manager. Patricia then threatened to leave negative reviews about the store online, saying that we discriminate against young workers and that I was an abusive manager who created hostile work environments. She said she was going to contact corporate and file complaints until I was fired. Over the next week, Patricia followed through on her threats. She left 1-star reviews on every platform she could find, describing me as a bully who unfairly targeted her son. She called corporate multiple times, filed complaints with the Better Business Bureau, and even contacted our district manager to demand that I be investigated. In her complaints, Patricia painted Kevin as a model employee who was eager to learn, but was sabotaged by an incompetent manager. She claimed that I never properly trained him, that I set him up to fail, and that I fired him because I didn't like young people. Fortunately, I had documented everything thoroughly. Corporate reviewed all the write-ups, the attendance records, and even pulled security footage that showed Kevin on his phone during work hours. They concluded that the termination was justified and that I'd actually been more patient than most managers would have been. But Patricia didn't stop there. She started showing up at the store, not to shop, but to stand outside and tell other customers about how unfairly her son had been treated. She'd approach people in the parking lot and launch into this whole story about workplace discrimination and abusive management. Last week, Patricia brought Kevin with her for one of these parking lot campaigns. I watched through the window as she pointed at the store and gestured dramatically while Kevin stood there looking embarrassed. A few customers actually turned around and left instead of dealing with whatever drama was happening outside. I finally had to call mall security and ask them to handle the situation. Patricia was asked to leave the property and was told that if she continued to harass customers, she'd be banned from the entire mall. The whole thing has been exhausting and honestly pretty disturbing. I've managed dozens of employees over the years, including many young people who are just starting their first jobs. Most of them, even the ones who struggled initially, eventually learned to meet basic workplace expectations, or at least recognised when they weren't cutting it. But Patricia has turned her son's firing into this crusade, where everyone else is to blame except Kevin. She's convinced that he was a perfect employee who was victimised by an unfair system, and she's willing to harass customers and damage a business to prove her point. The saddest part is that Kevin might have actually learned something valuable from this experience about responsibility and workplace expectations. Instead, his mother has taught him that when things don't go his way, the solution is to blame everyone else and make as much noise as possible until someone gives in. That story is over. This is helicopter parenting taken to its most toxic extreme. And honestly, Patricia has done more damage to Kevin's future than any manager ever could. Instead of teaching her son that actions have consequences and that improvement requires effort, she's created a monster who will blame everyone else for his failures for the rest of his life. The fact that she's literally harassing customers in parking lots to defend her chronically late phone-obsessed son shows just how far some parents will go to avoid admitting their kid isn't perfect. Kevin's going to struggle in every job he ever has because mommy taught him that showing up 2 hours late is everyone else's fault. Alright, if you've made it this far into this chaos, I have to assume you're as addicted to Reddit drama as I am. Make sure to subscribe if you want more of these wild stories because, trust me, the internet never runs out of people willing to share their most unhinged family situations with strangers. I'll be back with more stories that'll make you grateful for your own relatively normal problems. And speaking of parents who've completely lost the plot, here's one that had me questioning whether some people should be allowed to reproduce. I'm 26 and I work at a local gym as a personal trainer. It's a pretty standard job, nothing too crazy, but I love helping people reach their fitness goals and stay healthy. The gym has a strict policy about children under 16 not being allowed in the workout areas for safety and insurance reasons. There are signs everywhere. It's clearly stated in the membership agreement, and we have a kids area with supervised activities during certain hours. Last Tuesday, I was working with a client when I noticed this woman had brought her twin boys, probably around 10 years old, into the free weight section. They were running around between the equipment, picking up dumbbells they could barely lift, and generally creating a safety hazard. I approached the woman politely and explained that children aren't allowed in this area of the gym. I offered to show her to the family zone where her kids could play safely while she worked out nearby. The woman, who I later learned was named Brenda, immediately got hostile. She said her boys were mature for their age and that they knew how to behave around gym equipment. She claimed they'd been coming to gyms with her since they were babies and had never caused any problems. I explained that it wasn't about their behaviour, it was a safety and liability issue. The equipment is designed for adults, and having children in this area puts everyone at risk. I mentioned that we had great supervised activities for kids their age just down the hall. Brenda rolled her eyes and said I was being ridiculous. She said her boys were athletes, that they played Little League and soccer, so they understood sports equipment better than most adults. She refused to move them to the kids area, saying it was beneath them and that they'd be bored with baby activities. I tried explaining the policy again, but Brenda cut me off. She said that, as a paying member, she had the right to bring her children anywhere in the facility she wanted. She claimed that discriminating against her kids based on age was illegal and that she'd sue the gym if we tried to force them to leave. At this point, other gym members were starting to complain. One elderly man nearly tripped over one of the boys who was crawling under a bench press. A woman doing squats had to stop mid-set because the kids were running circles around her and she was afraid of accidentally hitting them. I called over my supervisor, Mark, to help handle the situation. Mark explained the policy again and offered several alternatives. The supervised kids area, the indoor track where families could walk together, or coming back during family swim time when the pool area was open to all ages. Brenda lost it completely. She started screaming that we were discriminating against her family, that her boys had every right to be there, and that she was going to report us to corporate for harassment. She said we were probably just jealous that her kids were in better shape than most of the adults in the gym. The boys, meanwhile, had found the cable machine and were trying to use it like a jungle gym. One of them had wrapped the cable around his waist and was attempting to do some kind of weird spinning move while his brother pulled on the other end. Mark immediately went over to stop them before someone got seriously hurt, and that's when Brenda really exploded. She accused Mark of assaulting her children and threatened to call the police. She started filming everything on her phone, narrating loudly about how the gym staff was attacking innocent kids. By this point, half the gym had stopped working out to watch this spectacle. Brenda was screaming, her kids were crying because they'd been told to stop playing, and other members were starting to leave because the environment had become so chaotic. Mark asked Brenda to either move her children to an appropriate area or leave the gym entirely. Brenda said she wasn't going anywhere and that we'd have to physically remove her family if we wanted them gone. So Mark called the police. While we waited for the officers to arrive, Brenda spent the time calling everyone she could think of. She called corporate, she called the local news station, she even called the mayor's office to complain about discrimination at our gym. The whole time she was loudly telling her kids that the mean gym people were trying to hurt them because they were jealous of their athletic abilities. When the police arrived, they listened to both sides of the story. The officer looked at the clear signage about age restrictions, reviewed our membership policies, and calmly explained to Brenda that businesses have the right to establish safety rules for their facilities. Brenda demanded to speak to the officer's supervisor, claiming that he was taking the gym's side because we'd probably bribed him. She said this was a conspiracy against families and that she was going to expose the corruption in our local police department. The officer gave Brenda a choice: follow the gym's rules or be escorted off the property for trespassing. Brenda chose to leave, but not before announcing loudly that she was going to sue everyone involved and that we'd all regret treating her family so poorly. As she was gathering her things, Brenda told her kids that this was an example of how unfair the world could be, and that sometimes bad people try to stop good people from achieving their dreams. She said that the gym staff were bullies who picked on children because we couldn't handle competition. The boys seemed confused more than anything else. One of them asked why they couldn't just play in the kids' area like the nice man suggested, and Brenda snapped that they were too advanced for baby games and shouldn't have to lower themselves to that level. Before leaving, Brenda made sure to tell every member she passed that the gym was unsafe for families and that the staff would kick out anyone who didn't fit their perfect image. She handed out her business card and asked people to contact her if they'd witnessed the discrimination she'd experienced. The next day, Brenda posted a lengthy review on every platform imaginable. She claimed that the gym deliberately targets families, that the staff are untrained and aggressive, and that they physically threatened her children for no reason. She posted photos of her boys looking sad and said they were traumatized by the experience. She also started a Facebook group called Families Against Gym Discrimination and invited everyone she knew to share their own stories of unfair treatment at fitness facilities. The group has 3 members: Brenda, her mother, and someone who appears to be a spam bot. Corporate did investigate the incident, reviewed the security footage, and spoke with the officer who responded. They concluded that all staff members followed proper procedures and that the gym's safety policies were clearly communicated and legally sound. But Brenda wasn't satisfied with that outcome. She's now threatening to organise protests outside the gym and has been calling local news stations trying to get them to cover what she calls the biggest discrimination scandal in our city's history. Last I heard, she was trying to get her boys enrolled in some kind of child advocacy programme so they could speak publicly about their traumatic experience of being asked to follow basic safety rules. The whole thing has been surreal. We deal with difficult members sometimes, but I've never seen someone turn a simple safety policy into a constitutional crisis. The worst part is that those kids are learning that throwing tantrums and playing victim is the appropriate response when you don't get your way. That story is over. This woman turned a basic safety rule into her personal civil rights movement and traumatised her own children in the process, teaching kids that rules don't apply to them and that throwing public tantrums will get them what they want is setting them up for a lifetime of disappointment. The fact that she's now trying to turn her sons into poster children for her imaginary discrimination case is just the perfect ending to this train wreck. Some people really think the entire world should rearrange itself around their convenience. Here's something that'll restore a tiny bit of your faith in karma, even if it took way too long to kick in. I'm 29 and I've been working at the same marketing company for about 6 years. It's a decent place to work, good benefits, reasonable hours, and most of my co-workers are pretty cool. About 3 years ago, we hired this guy named Brandon, who seemed normal enough at first, but quickly revealed himself to be one of those people who takes credit for everyone else's work. It started small. Brandon would jump into conversations about projects he had nothing to do with and start using phrases like, "when we developed that strategy," or "our campaign really succeeded because of the approach we took." At first I thought maybe he was just trying to sound like a team player, but it became clear that he was deliberately trying to associate himself with successful projects. The real problems started when Brandon began presenting other people's ideas as his own in meetings. I'd spend days developing a concept, share it with the team for feedback, and then watch Brandon present it to our boss the next week, like he'd come up with it himself. When I tried to speak up, Brandon would say something like, "Oh right, you helped with the research on that," or "thanks for your input on my idea." It was infuriating, but Brandon was really good at making it seem like I was being petty or territorial if I pushed back too hard. He had this way of acknowledging that other people contributed while still positioning himself as the mastermind behind everything. The worst incident happened about 18 months ago. I'd been working on a major campaign for one of our biggest clients for nearly 3 months. It was a complete overhaul of their branding strategy, and I'd put in countless hours researching their market, developing concepts, and creating presentations. The night before the big client meeting, Brandon somehow got access to my files and spent the evening creating his own version of my presentation. When we walked into the meeting the next morning, Brandon immediately launched into his pitch, using all of my research, my concepts, and even some of my exact wording. I was so shocked that I just sat there for the first few minutes. By the time I tried to say something, Brandon had already established himself as the project lead and was fielding all the client's questions with information I'd gathered. The client loved the campaign and specifically praised Brandon for his innovative thinking and thorough research. Brandon graciously accepted all the credit and even threw in a comment about how he'd been developing these concepts for months. After the meeting, I confronted Brandon privately. I told him that he'd stolen my work and that I was going to report the situation to our supervisor. Brandon looked me straight in the eye and said that ideas belong to the company, not to individuals, and that it was his job to present the best possible work to clients, regardless of who originally developed it. He said that if I was more assertive and better at presenting, maybe I wouldn't feel so threatened when other team members built on my contributions. He actually made it sound like he was doing me a favour by taking my mediocre work and turning it into something presentable. I did report it to our supervisor, but Brandon had covered his tracks well. He'd made sure to copy himself on emails about the project, had inserted himself into meetings I'd set up, and had documented his contributions in ways that made it look like we'd been collaborating all along. Our supervisor basically told us to work it out between ourselves and reminded us that collaboration was important for team success. Brandon got promoted 6 months later, partially based on the success of my campaign. For the next year and a half, Brandon continued his pattern of taking credit for other people's work. He'd swoop in at the last minute on projects, make minor tweaks, and then present the final version like he'd been leading the effort all along. Several other co-workers started complaining about the same thing, but Brandon was always careful to leave just enough ambiguity that management couldn't pin anything definitive on him. But here's where karma finally decided to show up fashionably late to the party. Last month, Brandon made a huge mistake. He stole a campaign concept from our newest team member, Riley, who's fresh out of college and wasn't familiar with Brandon's reputation yet. Riley had developed this brilliant social media strategy for a tech startup, complete with mock-ups, content calendars, and engagement projections. Brandon did his usual routine, taking Riley's work and presenting it as his own to both our internal team and the client. But what Brandon didn't know was that Riley had already submitted the exact same concept to a national marketing competition 3 weeks earlier. The client loved the presentation and immediately approved the campaign. Brandon was practically glowing as he accepted praise for his creativity and strategic thinking. He even made a comment about how this was the kind of innovative work that separated experienced marketers from entry-level employees. 2 weeks later, Riley's submission won first place in the national competition. The award announcement included detailed descriptions of the winning campaign, Riley's photo, and quotes about her creative process and strategic thinking. The client, who follows industry news closely, immediately recognised the campaign they'd just approved. They called our company asking why Brandon had presented award-winning work as his own original concept, and whether this was some kind of elaborate plagiarism situation. Our management team had to do some very awkward explaining. They reviewed all the documentation and discovered that Riley had indeed developed the entire concept independently, had submitted it to the competition before Brandon's presentation, and had timestamps proving she'd created all the materials weeks before Brandon claimed to have developed them. Brandon tried to spin it as a misunderstanding, claiming that he and Riley had collaborated so closely that he'd forgotten who had originated which ideas. But Riley had been meticulous about documenting her work, and she had emails, file histories, and even voice memos of her brainstorming sessions that proved she'd developed everything on her own. The client was furious about being presented with plagiarized work and threatened to terminate their contract with our company. Management had to offer significant concessions to keep the account, including removing Brandon from all future projects with that client. But the real kicker came when other team members started coming forward with their own evidence of Brandon's theft. It turned out that several people had been quietly documenting incidents over the past few years, and Riley's situation had given them the courage to speak up. Within a week, management had a file full of documented cases of Brandon taking credit for other people's work. There were email trails, project timelines, and even some recorded meetings where Brandon had claimed ownership of ideas that clearly belonged to others. Brandon was fired immediately, not just for the plagiarism, but for creating a pattern of unethical behaviour that had damaged team morale and put client relationships at risk. The best part? Riley's competition win brought a lot of positive attention to our company. She's been featured in several industry publications, and her success has actually brought in new clients who want to work with the award-winning creative team. Brandon, meanwhile, has been having trouble finding new employment. It turns out that word travels fast in our industry, and several companies have already heard about his reputation for taking credit for other people's work. He's been reaching out to former colleagues, asking for references, but most people aren't comfortable vouching for someone with his track record. Last week I heard through the grapevine that Brandon had to take a job at a much smaller company for significantly less money than he was making here. Apparently, even that employer only hired him after he agreed to a probationary period with very strict oversight. Riley, on the other hand, got promoted to senior strategist and is now leading the team that Brandon used to be part of. She's implemented new processes for documenting project contributions and has created an environment where everyone gets proper credit for their work. Sometimes justice takes its sweet time, but when it finally shows up, it's absolutely beautiful to watch. That story is over. 3 years of watching this guy steal credit and climb the ladder on other people's backs, and karma finally delivered the most poetic justice possible. Getting caught plagiarising work that had literally won a national award is the kind of spectacular downfall that restores your faith in the universe. Riley went from victim to award winner to team leader, while Brandon went from office predator to unemployed plagiarist. Sometimes the best revenge really is just letting people destroy themselves. I never thought I'd be the type of person to care about office politics, but here I am, 3 months after what I now call the Great Coffee Incident, still thinking about how a simple misunderstanding nearly destroyed my career. My name is David, I'm 31, and I work as a data analyst for a mid-sized consulting firm in Minneapolis. It's the kind of place where people wear khakis and button-downs, where the biggest excitement usually comes from someone bringing donuts on Friday morning. I've always been what you'd call a creature of habit. Every morning at exactly 8:47, I'd walk to the break room, pour myself a cup of coffee from the communal pot, add 2 sugars and a splash of cream, and head back to my desk. It was my routine, my small moment of peace before diving into spreadsheets and pivot tables. The troubles started on a Tuesday in March. I was running about 10 minutes behind schedule because of a delayed train, so instead of my usual 8:47 coffee run, I didn't make it to the break room until almost 9:15. The pot was nearly empty, just enough for maybe half a cup of that bitter overbrewed sludge that sits there all morning. But sitting next to the coffee maker was a French press, gleaming and full of what looked like perfectly brewed coffee. There was no name on it, no note, nothing to indicate it belonged to anyone specific. In my sleepy, caffeine-deprived state, I figured someone had made extra and left it for the team. It wouldn't be the first time. We had a pretty generous office culture when it came to sharing food and drinks, so I poured myself a cup. It was incredible, rich and smooth, with hints of chocolate and caramel. Best coffee I'd ever had in that office. I savoured every sip, feeling more human with each one. I even went back for a second cup around 10:30, thinking whoever made this deserved a thank you note. It wasn't until lunch that I learned the truth. I was heating up my sad desk salad in the microwave when Jennifer from accounting stormed into the break room, her face flushed with anger. Jennifer was one of those people who took everything personally, the type who'd send passive-aggressive emails about dirty dishes in the sink. She looked around frantically, then zeroed in on the empty French press sitting by the sink. Her voice, when she spoke, was shaking with rage. Someone drank my coffee, my entire French press of coffee that I brought from home. She was talking to nobody in particular, but loud enough for half the office to hear. My stomach dropped. That beautiful, perfect coffee that had made my morning, I'd stolen it, without thinking, without asking. I'd taken something that belonged to someone else. I felt like a complete idiot, but the damage was done. I walked over to Jennifer, ready to apologise and offer to replace her coffee, maybe even buy her a bag of whatever premium beans she'd used, but before I could say a word, she continued her rant. This is exactly the kind of selfish behaviour that's ruining this workplace. People think they can just take whatever they want without consequences. I opened my mouth to confess, but she kept going. I bet it was someone from the marketing department. They're always acting like they own the place, taking up meeting rooms, leaving messes everywhere. Probably that new guy, Alex. He has that entitled look about him. Alex was standing right there, holding his own coffee mug, looking completely bewildered. He'd only been with the company for 2 weeks, seemed like a nice enough guy, maybe a little eager to please, but hardly the office villain Jennifer was painting him as. "I didn't touch your coffee," Alex said quietly. "I don't even drink coffee. I'm more of a tea person." Jennifer's eyes narrowed. "Right, sure you are. I suppose the French press just emptied itself." I watched this innocent man get accused of something I'd done, watched him try to defend himself, while Jennifer worked herself into an even bigger fury. The smart thing, the right thing, would have been to step forward and clear the air, but I froze. Maybe it was cowardice, maybe it was the fear of becoming Jennifer's target, but I just stood there, like a statue. The situation escalated quickly. Jennifer marched straight to our supervisor, Linda, and demanded an investigation into the coffee theft. Linda, to her credit, tried to treat it as the minor misunderstanding it should have been, but Jennifer wasn't having it. She wanted justice, she wanted accountability, she wanted someone to pay for her missing coffee. By the end of the week, there was a new policy posted in the break room. All personal food and beverages had to be labelled with names and dates. The communal coffee fund was suspended, pending a review of break room etiquette. Someone had to attend a mandatory workshop on workplace respect and property boundaries. Alex became increasingly isolated. People started avoiding him, not because they necessarily believed he was a coffee thief, but because being associated with drama in our office was social suicide. He'd eat lunch alone, work late to avoid the awkward small talk, and I could see the enthusiasm draining out of him day by day. Meanwhile, I was drowning in guilt. Every time I saw Alex sitting by himself, every time Jennifer made another snide comment about people who can't respect other people's property, I felt sick. I'd created this mess with my thoughtless mistake, and now an innocent person was paying the price. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. Alex had been putting in extra hours, trying to prove himself, trying to show that he was a team player, despite the coffee incident. He'd volunteered for every project, stayed late to help with urgent deadlines, and generally bent over backward to rehabilitate his reputation. But Jennifer wasn't satisfied. During a team meeting, she brought up the coffee situation again, suggesting that maybe people who couldn't be trusted with small things shouldn't be trusted with important client work. It was a direct attack on Alex's competence and character, and I watched him shrink in his chair as she spoke. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my grandfather, who used to tell me that a man's character isn't measured by his mistakes, but by how he handles them. I'd made a mistake, that was human, but letting someone else suffer for it, that was something else entirely. The next morning, I got to the office early and asked Linda if I could speak with her privately. I told her everything, from my delayed train to my assumption about the communal coffee, to my cowardice in not speaking up sooner. I expected anger, disappointment, maybe even disciplinary action. Instead, Linda just sighed. "You know, I figured it was something like this. Jennifer has a tendency to blow things out of proportion, and Alex never struck me as the type to steal coffee, I was hoping whoever really did it would come forward eventually. She called a brief team meeting that afternoon. I stood in front of my colleagues and confessed to the great coffee incident of March. I apologised to Jennifer for taking her coffee without permission, and I apologised to Alex for letting him take the blame for something he didn't do. Jennifer's reaction was interesting. Instead of the vindication I expected her to feel, she seemed almost disappointed that the mystery was solved so simply. She'd built up this elaborate narrative of workplace theft and disrespect, and the reality was just a tired guy who made an honest mistake. Alex, on the other hand, was gracious beyond belief. He thanked me for coming forward and said he understood how these things could happen. He didn't seem angry, just relieved that the cloud hanging over him was finally lifting. The aftermath was surprisingly positive. The team seemed to respect that I'd eventually done the right thing, even if it took me longer than it should have. Jennifer and I never became friends, but the tension eased. Alex settled into his role and became one of the most reliable people on our team. I learned something important about myself during those weeks of watching an innocent person suffer for my mistake. I learned that small acts of cowardice can have big consequences, that silence in the face of injustice makes you complicit in it. I also learned that it's never too late to do the right thing, even when it's uncomfortable. These days, I still drink coffee every morning at 8:47. But now I always check if there's a name on anything before I pour myself a cup. And when I make mistakes, which I still do regularly, I try to own them quickly instead of letting them fester into something bigger and more harmful. Sometimes the most important lessons come from the smallest incidents. And sometimes being a good person means admitting when you've been a bad one. That's the end of that story. It's wild how something as simple as coffee can spiral into such workplace drama, but I respect that he eventually came clean. It takes real courage to admit your mistakes, especially when someone else is already taking the heat. Now let me share another story that caught my attention. This one about family dynamics and the complicated nature of forgiveness. This next story deals with something we've all probably experienced in some form. That moment when you realise a friendship isn't what you thought it was. My name is Rebecca, and I'm 27 years old. For the past 8 years, I thought I had found my person in college. You know that friend who just gets you, who you can call at 2 a.m. when your world is falling apart, who celebrates your wins like they're her own. That was supposed to be Emma. We met during freshman orientation at State, bonding over our shared love of terrible reality TV and our mutual hatred of our dorm's broken air conditioning. By sophomore year, we were inseparable. We'd study together at the library until closing, take weekend trips to nearby cities, and spend hours talking about our dreams and fears and everything in between. Emma was the kind of friend who remembered the little things. She'd bring me soup when I was sick, send me funny memes during boring lectures, and always knew exactly what to say when I was stressed about exams or boys or family drama. I thought I was the same kind of friend to her. After graduation, we both ended up in Chicago, which felt like fate. Emma got a job at a marketing agency downtown, and I started working as a graphic designer for a small non-profit. We lived about 20 minutes apart and made it a point to see each other at least twice a week. Sunday brunch became our sacred tradition. For 6 years, this arrangement worked perfectly. We were each other's plus ones to weddings, each other's emergency contacts, each other's chosen family, in a city where we didn't have relatives nearby. When Emma's dad had his heart attack junior year, I was the first person she called. When I went through my brutal breakup with Jake, Emma showed up at my apartment with ice cream and tissues without me even asking. But looking back now, I can see the cracks that were always there, the subtle ways Emma made everything about herself, how she'd listen to my problems but somehow always steer the conversation back to her own issues, how she'd get weird and distant whenever something good happened to me, then bounce back to normal a few days later. I told myself these were just quirks, that all friendships have their rough patches. Emma was going through a lot with her job, her family, her on and off relationship with this guy, Trevor. I made excuses for her behaviour because that's what good friends do, right? The real trouble started about 10 months ago when I got promoted at work. It wasn't anything huge, just a step up to senior designer with a modest salary increase. But I was excited. I'd been working toward this for 3 years, putting in extra hours, taking on difficult projects, really proving myself. I called Emma right after my boss gave me the news, expecting her to be thrilled for me. Instead, her response was lukewarm, at best. "Oh, that's nice," she said, her voice flat. "I guess they finally noticed all that overtime you've been putting in." I brushed it off. Maybe she was having a bad day, maybe she was distracted, but when we met for brunch that Sunday, she barely acknowledged my promotion. Instead, she spent the entire meal complaining about her own job, how her boss didn't appreciate her, how she was definitely more qualified than her recently promoted co-worker. The pattern continued over the following weeks. Whenever I brought up anything positive happening in my life, Emma would either change the subject or find a way to diminish it. When I mentioned that I was finally able to afford a nicer apartment, she pointed out how expensive rent was getting, and how I'd probably struggle to keep up with the payments. When I talked about the cute guy I'd started dating, she immediately launched into a story about how all men are basically garbage. I started censoring myself around her, downplaying good news, avoiding topics that might trigger her negativity. It felt like walking on eggshells with someone who was supposed to be my closest friend. The breaking point came during my birthday dinner in September. I'd planned a small celebration at this Italian place we both loved, invited maybe 8 people total. Emma arrived an hour late, which wasn't unusual for her, but she seemed off from the moment she sat down. Throughout dinner she was checking her phone constantly, giving one-word answers to questions, generally acting like she'd rather be anywhere else. When the server brought out the cake I'd ordered for myself, Emma didn't even look up from her phone. But the real kicker came when my friend Lisa asked about my recent promotion and the new project I was heading up. I started explaining how excited I was about the creative direction we were taking, and Emma literally rolled her eyes and said, "God, do we have to talk about work? It's supposed to be a party." The table went quiet. Lisa looked confused and a little hurt on my behalf. I felt humiliated, like a child who'd been scolded for being too enthusiastic about something important to them. I didn't say anything in the moment because I didn't want to cause a scene at my own birthday dinner, but the rest of the evening felt tainted. Emma left early, claiming she had a headache, and barely said goodbye. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the evening, but also the past few months, and slowly began to see a pattern I'd been ignoring. Emma wasn't happy for me when good things happened. She wasn't supportive when I needed encouragement. She wasn't really being a friend at all. I decided to test my theory. Over the next few weeks, I paid closer attention to our interactions. When Emma complained about her job, I listened and offered advice and support like always. But when I shared my own news, good or bad, she'd either dismiss it or somehow make it about herself. The final confirmation came when I told her I'd been asked to speak at a design conference in Portland. It was a huge opportunity for me, something I'd dreamed about for years. Emma's response was immediate and cutting. "Well, I hope you don't embarrass yourself. Public speaking isn't really your thing, is it?" I stared at her across the coffee shop table, genuinely shocked. This was supposed to be my best friend, the person who knew me better than anyone, and she was actively trying to undermine my confidence about something I was genuinely excited about. That's when I realised that Emma had never really been happy for me, not once in 8 years. She'd been there for the bad times because misery loves company, but she couldn't handle my successes because they highlighted what she felt was missing in her own life. I started pulling back gradually. I stopped initiating.
Man, let's get a little echo going on. 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 You know, just get a little echo going on. You know, just get a little echo going on. You know, your skin look like God, you know. You know, your skin look like God, you know. You know, your skin look like God, you know. You know, your skin look like God, you know. Yeah, baby, get out of here. I can't really hear. You know, your skin look like God, so tall. Yeah, baby, so get out of here. I can't really hear. You know, your skin look like God, so tall. Yeah, baby, so get out of here. I can't really hear. You know, your skin look like God, so tall. Yeah, baby, so get out of here. I can't really hear. You know, your skin look like God, so tall. Yeah, baby, so get out of here. I can't really hear. You know, your skin look like God, so tall. Yeah, man. Yeah, man. All right, now it shouldn't echo. So I want to talk about chat. Ain't even nobody watching me, bro. Let's talk about how I got class in like 5 hours. And I am proud about myself. I haven't went to sleep in a single class, so something to look for. That's something to say, bro. Oh, look at the little kitty. Jared McCain stats was looking like, man. Let's see. He's got to get his flow back, bro. He got to enter the flow state. I need to go to sleep, bro.
What did I miss? That message from a girl on TikTok. Very big. I'm not gonna say that because Gabby.
I'm out of here, bro.